What's your guys' favorite type of interview to do? Like this type of persona. Like we can get this person. Like we always kill it. Like
comedians are usually pretty good because they are performers.
Yeah.
And so those work well. It just depends on the personality. You want someone who's kind of... I like people who will push back on Kibbe a little bit and kind of like ask him questions. I really liked when we had Andrew Heaton on because Heaton was not so sure of himself politically. And he was saying, hey, you know, what do you think about this, Kibbe? What's your opinion about this? I'm not really sure how I feel. And usually it's Kibbe asking all the questions and saying, this is the way things are. And so having a guest who is willing to push back a little bit and ask some questions and made it more of a dialogue instead of just an interview. I like those guys better.
Yeah, I like it too. I like it too when Kibbe talks a little bit more. I don't know. I like Kibbe.
Yeah, he's an interesting fellow.
I like it when someone brings him in to interview him.
Yeah, we should do more of that.
I wonder if there's more. Are there any good like Austrian economists that are currently alive, or maybe even ones that are dead that were good at storytelling? Like weren't.
I thought Rothbard was always good at that.
Yeah.
He was very intelligent.
I feel like Austrian economics better than any other style. Kind of tells a story, so I figure you should be a good storyteller if you're truly an Austrian economist.
One would hope so, yeah. Unfortunately, the economics profession attracts people who tend to be very wonky and into numbers and into, you know, writing a lot and not actually speaking or performing very much. So you don't get a lot of good ones, but, you know, there's old videos of, like, I thought Milton Friedman was a great communicator.
Oh, yeah, I guess
he was great on television, but, like, there's old videos of Hayek on television, and he's not very good on television.
I tried to watch the Hayek firing line interview just because it's freaking Hayek.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make it through.
His accent is very thick as well. It's hard to understand what he's saying.
I'd rather just read Hayek and then imagine I'm talking to him while I'm reading the book. I mean, I guess, Milton Friedman might be the gold standard of communication.
I mean, as many issues as I have with his economics, he was a little bit of a monetarist and everything. I think he was the best communicator for libertarian ideas of the last 50 years. He was fantastic at it. My
father-in-law is an economist, and he's a huge Milton fan. I've always tried to edge him on to debate me on Hayek versus Milton on the monetarist theories and stuff, but he doesn't know enough about the Hayek side of things to really, I don't know, I can never get him to I want to get a little bit of an argument with him, but
sure.
There's just one Milton Friedman quote he always gives me, and I was like, well, okay. But
what's the quote?
I'm trying to remember now, every inflation is like a monetary, I'm trying to think phenomenon or something of that, so I've heard it enough from him, which is, I agree with it. It's
true.
Yeah.
People think inflation is the rise in the price level, but there's no such thing as the price level. It's the rise in the money supply. That's what inflation is. And by definition, it deflates the value of money it lowers the value of money by increasing the money supply. And there's no such thing as the price level. Everything has a different price, and they change for lots of reasons. One of the reasons the prices change is because money has lost value, but another reason is because technology gets better. Or there's lots of reasons, But
I mean, Milton even Hayek liked UBI for a little while.
He did.
So they all have their own little quirky things.
Ludwig von Mises liked the League of Nations. So nobody's perfect.
I'm always curious why not more liberals or left-leaning liberals. I want to keep that word. I want to take that word back.
Use it by all means.
That's me. I want to be a liberal.
Cool.
But leftists, why there's no Austrian leftists? Because you can support minimum wage, in my mind.
I think the reason is because leftism is fundamentally collectivist, and you can be kind of a leftist liberal who, for kind of more pragmatic reasons, supports things like free speech and supports civil rights and things like that. But I think the Austrian school is so methodologically individualist, and I think the leftist ideology is fundamentally collectivist, and it makes it a lot harder.
Yeah. That's the best answer I've heard, because I'm thinking you can be a proponent of raising the minimum wage, and you just can admit, yep, we're going to raise a few rungs of the ladder, we're going to cut some people out, but I think in the long run, this is actually better. And just admit the economic truths of whatever the policy is through the Austrian lens, but there's no such, I've never met a leftist that subscribes to the Austrian school of thought.
Well, I think it's a Hayek quote, if progressives understood economics, they wouldn't be, if socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists, I just don't think you get that. So you have beef. You're here today because you have beef. And I want to talk about your beef.
With my 2-year-old?
Well, yeah, let's start with your beef with your 2-year-old, and then we'll move on to the other beef you have.
Well, the more important beef, yeah. Today started out with quite a hectic day at the Feuz house we had the 2-year-old draw on the wall, and I didn't even notice it with a whiteboard marker. What do you call that? The X
Dry erase.
Dry erase marker. And I'm working in my office.
Black.
Blue.
Blue.
A beautiful tint of blue. And
Just paint the wall
my
blue.
3-year-old rats him out. My 2-year-old and 3-year-old will do that. If I threaten them with a punishment, like who wants to go sit in timeout, and I'm talking to one of them, they'll point to the other one like, oh, he does. I'm like, well, he's not doing anything. So I turn around and all 4 of the walls in my office have blue marker all over them. So I kind of let it go. I'm like, oh, whatever. This is the penalty I get for having toddlers. My wife is not happy, and she forces the 2-year-old to, at least, she's like, you have to scrub it. We all know he's not going to get it out. This is more for learning the lesson of don't draw on the walls. And then my 3-year-old's just laughing at him, and I was like, how's this starting all over? The kids are so much smarter. But at that point, I was running a little late to get here because I'm making sure my wife was in a good place.
I think you should just run with it and paint the walls blue. It's
Luckily,
a sign from the universe. It's time to change the color of the walls to blue.
Luckily, my office is still the construction paint, so we didn't really lose anything. It isn't like we put new paint on it.
Excellent. Well, there you go. It's an opportunity to redecorate. The Chinese word for crisis and opportunity are the same, they always say. But speaking of China, you have beef with the new Disney Mulan movie.
Yeah, I think...
You're upset about this. Tell me what's going on with Mulan.
Yeah, it was trending. I found out through it was trending on social media, but apparently this new Mulan movie comes out. Disney's releasing it on Disney Plus for an extra $30 fee, which seems a little ridiculous, but turns out at their credits, they're thanking a bunch of Chinese officials, and it happens to be one of them is in charge of like propaganda and the concentration camps that are, engaged in gross human rights violations against the Muslim population. I'm blanking now on the official name for this group of people, and they filmed right in the region where they're like next door. Essentially, I think the Babylon Bee poked fun at them in one of their articles for it. They have a way of hitting on truth through satire, but it seems absolutely insane that this, and I think back as a Catholic pro-life, that Disney's pulling out of Georgia and say we can't film there anymore because of a pro-life heartbeat bill, but we're going to go ahead and film in China next to, the equivalent of concentration camps.
Yeah, so it's almost like Disney doesn't really care about human rights as much as they pretend to.
It's this woke capitalism. It's not really woke.
Yeah, I remember. I'm from Georgia, so I remember that thing about, Georgia's becoming a major movie-making capital of America because Hollywood is just too expensive to film in now, and Atlanta's a lot cheaper. So you have a lot of major filmmakers who are now flocking to Atlanta to make movies there, which is cool. But yeah, people were saying because of the lawmakers passed a law we didn't like, we're not going to film there anymore. Particularly Disney was saying this, and now they're filming in China, which is, a far worse human rights abuser than any state in the United States is. It's insane that they are not drawing a distinction there. But I mean, China is, not to say anything against the Chinese people or anything, but China is the reason why movies suck in general these days, because there's so many Chinese people and there's so much money to be made there that Hollywood movies are always catering to the Asian market. They want to make a movie that not only they can sell in America to our 350 million people, they want to sell them to the 2 billion people in Asia as well. So I read a whole article about this, about how the movies are super dumbed down now because they have to translate in vastly different cultures with different languages. And if you do like a finely textured character study, human drama about Americans, it may not play so well over in China the same way that if you made a character study about Chinese people, that might not play well here in America. But what everybody can understand is explosions and special effects. So if you make a movie with lots of special effects and explosions, it'll play all over the world and people will like it and you'll make money. But if you make an interesting, clever story with a lot of humor or a lot of cultural references, it won't translate as well to other cultures. And so you won't make as much money on it, which is why comedies are like, when's the last time there was a big budget comedy?
I couldn't name you one.
Comedies used to be a huge genre of movies, and you just don't see comedies anymore. They're all action movies now, or horror movies. Those are the two types of movies that do really well.
Because comedy plays well with the culture that they're personifying.
Yeah, you have to have a frame of reference in order to get jokes. And if you make a joke that's a Chinese person's not going to get, then you can't show the movie in China. And then, a consequence of all this is that the Chinese government has a very censorious policy. There's a lot of stuff they won't allow to be shown because it might make communism look bad, or it might make China look bad, or it might make America look too good. And so a lot of stuff gets edited out of Chinese movies. And a lot of movies are made with that in mind, where we can't put this in because we won't be able to play it in China. I really admire Quentin Tarantino because when his last movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, came out, he refused to make cuts for the Chinese market. And he has enough clout that he can do that and get away with it. But most directors don't. And so they either make horrible cuts in the movies to play it in China so it won't offend the censors, or they write the movie and edit the movie in the first place to not offend the Chinese censors. So that's why I think you really don't get very good movies, unless they're indie movies that aren't really going to make a lot of money anyway. Those are some good films, but the Hollywood blockbusters just aren't what they used to be.
So what you're telling me is that the majority of movies today are being made around Chinese government propaganda guidelines.
That's exactly what I'm telling you.
Are getting, the benefits would be the incorrect word, but that's what we have to deal with.
There's more of them than there are of us, and they have a lot of money. They've also driven up the price of whiskey horrendously, because a few years ago the Asian market decided they like whiskey, and so they're starting to produce a little of their own. Japanese whiskey is apparently pretty good, but Scotch whiskey and bourbon have started being bought up by billions of Asians, and it's driving the price up. It's making it hard to get good whiskey. Speaking of good whiskey, what have you brought for us to drink today?
So I found, the marketing got me this. It's a Virginia whiskey from the Virginia Distillery Co. It's a port cask finish, seems to be my theme.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia Highland whiskey. And I bought it because I've been watching the show Outlander with my wife. Scotland, I saw it. I was like, it had a kind of a cool classic kind of bottle feel, almost what you find in like an old Western. I feel like this is what they pull off the shelf and serve the cowboys who walks John Wayne as he walks into the saloon. So it was complete marketing buy. The first half that I drank was late at night, and I already been drinking a lot with a Catholic priest and a few other friends, so I don't actually remember what it tastes like. So I'm kind of excited to have another glass.
Pour a little bit for us here.
There's the sound of it's actually, I think, a plastic cork.
It's getting harder and harder to find real cork. Apparently, the cork wood is pretty much only produced in Portugal, and there's not that much of it. And so the production of bottles has gone so far up that you can't get enough actual cork wood to fill them up. So synthetic corks are being used a lot more frequently than they used to be.
I'll leave it uncorked,
which I guess
just
is fine.
In case.
I guess it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't really have an issue with the synthetic corks. Cheers. It's not quite as aesthetic as the original, but, as long as...
Yeah, I don't think it changes the quality of the whiskey, but...
I'd rather have a synthetic cork than a screw-on metal cap, so...
It's screw-on, although Jameson's screw-on. I do like Jameson, but the quality... I judge the quality, or where my expectations drop.
Oh. You can really taste the sweetness of the port on the front end. That's good.
The last whiskey we had in here had a little bit less of a bite. This one has more of a bite at the end. It's not overpowering bite, though, but... It's also...
I like that. I think it evolves nicely. Like, the first taste you get on the tip of your tongue is very different from what it is in the back of your mouth and when you swallow it, the aftertaste.
Yeah, I'd buy it again. It's also... I live out in the Shenandoah Valley, so it's got the blue. I feel like I'm supporting the local economy a little bit.
I weirdly feel like it's got a bit of a banana character to it.
Interesting.
I don't know why.
I don't know if I tasted that. Ooh, that one even had a little bit more of a bite.
It's good. I like it a lot. So yeah, Hollywood, woke capitalism in Hollywood is a real problem. I think the other story I wanted to talk about today is the Oscars have announced that they are going to only consider films for Best Picture that have a racially diverse cast, or an inclusive cast as they're calling it, which I assume means racially diverse. I'm not sure what exactly their criteria are for this, but the first thing I thought of is all of the amazing movies, particularly history dramas, that are set in Europe that have existed over the past 100 years of movie making, and how they would exclude all these from consideration for Best Picture. Things like Barry Lyndon, or Gone with the Wind is no good anymore, but Amadeus is one of my favorite films, set in Vienna in the 18th century. Not a lot of black folks around, not a lot of Hispanic people around, and they're excluding these. And then like Holocaust movies, like Schindler's List, like how are you going to make a Holocaust movie now? Like it seems counterproductive to say we're going to exclude movies unless they have a certain cast. And the only way around that is if they're just going to arbitrarily cast people of color in roles that make no sense for the story that they're telling. And I assume that's what they're probably going to do, but it's like, why can't we tell a historically accurate story anymore and acknowledge that there were periods in history and places in the world where people were not racially diverse? And, that's just the way history is. And history is not always pretty, and we don't have to celebrate it and say it's a good thing. But, like, that's what happened. Can't we tell the truth?
Yeah, so it's either going to be, they're either incentivizing, and maybe both, but they're either incentivizing, we just talked about it with China, so either the movies are going to get worse, continually to get worse, and we're continually going to sit and complain like, when was the last time there was a good movie made? Because we're going to be writing these crap, scripts to accommodate so we can win an award. Or the award itself that used to have some prestige, no one's going to care about it anymore. Maybe both happen simultaneously together.
I think that's already kind of happened. The Oscars have been getting lower and lower ratings every year. Last year, they didn't even have a host because they couldn't find a celebrity willing to do it who didn't have something objectionable in their background. This is the problem when you dig through people's Twitter for the last 20 years and you're like, let's find everything they've ever written. And, the cultural standards of what's acceptable to say are changing so rapidly now that you're always going to find something 10 years ago that you object to. And they couldn't even find someone to host it. So they had Oscars without a host. They got the lowest ratings they've ever had. I think this is a desperation play to try to do something to get ratings back, but it's not going to work. It's going to have the opposite effect. Someone made a point to me, which I think is a really good point, that the Oscars are an industry award, and we treat it like it's this national event. But like every industry has its industry awards, like the National Plumbers Association or something, or the Roofers of America will have like Roof of the Year awards, and nobody watches them. They're not televised. The only people who go are people who are in the industry. And, it's not that big of a deal. But for some reason with movies, we act like everybody in the country has to care about these awards. And we televise them and all the stars are there and people get fixated on them and the red carpet. But it doesn't matter. It's a stupid show.
Yeah, and half the time the awards that win, you're like, I hated that movie. The movie was crap. There's politics going into the back of it. And I feel like now we're closing in the box or making the box smaller that you have to fit in to get an award to make the movies. And so they're claiming they want to diversify the movies, the cast, but I feel like the ideas that are going to be now espoused and communicated in the movies is going to get less and less diverse.
Well, yeah, this is the whole problem with the diversity thing is it's superficially diverse, right? We have diverse skin colors or diverse sexual orientations or diverse genders or whatever, but the ideas are uniform. And the ideas are really what matters in terms of diversity. I don't care what people's skin color are. I don't care what their sexual orientation is. I care what their ideas are. That's the important thing. That's what really differentiates individuals is the way that they think and the way that the values they hold. And those are the things we should be celebrating diversity about. But for some reason, people think that these things like skin color really matter all of a sudden, which is so ironic because the whole struggle of the past 150 years has been to get people to pay less attention to skin color and to say we should be colorblind and we should judge people based on the content of their character rather than their color of their skin, which is Martin Luther King's dream, which always seemed good to me. I'm cool with Martin Luther King. I agree with him. But now we have to fixate on people's skin color, which seems like the opposite of progress as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, you would see the joke periodically in any kind of movie show where someone would say something slightly politically incorrect. I'm like, nah, man, I don't see skin color. And that was kind of like the running theme of my childhood. And now we've had this dramatic shift to where we have to focus in on your skin color, your nationality, your race, your religion, if you fall into the right categories, essentially.
Stephen Colbert used to do that gag a lot on the Colbert Report. He would always say, I don't see race. I don't know what race you are, to all of his guests, which I thought was funny. I thought that show was pretty funny early on before Stephen Colbert became completely in the tank for the woke left. But yeah, it's just weird how that's changed. And I don't think the Oscars are doing themselves any favors. And people are already complaining that the movies that are getting nominated for Best Picture are not movies that anybody sees or likes or cares about. If you look at the difference between the movies that got nominated like in the 90s and the movies that are getting nominated now, you had big blockbusters that everybody saw and everybody loved in the 90s, and now these are pretty niche artsy movies, and some of them are good. Some of them I've liked a lot that have won Best Picture, but they're not like the popular successes. They're critical successes, but they're not the popular successes or the box office successes that these movies used to be.
Yeah, I grew up too. I had a different culture growing up. My culture, I don't know, however my parents, I don't know if they did it deliberately or it was just something natural that happened. We didn't pay too much attention to I've always been terrible at knowing the actors in the movies because I was never in a culture that idolized Hollywood or celebrities or even athletes, although we became pretty big. I was a big sports fan growing up, or musicians, where a lot of people more are. So I've always been on the side where I really don't care. I actually find it annoying when people tell me like, oh, they also played in this film, this film, this film, and I'm like, I only care about the character that I'm watching right now. I don't care what other films this guy played in or this actress played in. So now, yeah, and I feel like when I do pay attention to the Oscars, it's very much like a film I've never heard. Like I do go to the movie theaters, I do watch the movies, but I enjoy a good story or something philosophically challenging or that really takes me out of my comfort zone in a way that, and now everything is dumbed down. I found that was interesting. You're talking about China, and I feel like the whole industry is cheapened now. The awards are going to be cheapened. The products that are coming out, I feel like we're always saying everything breaks too easily. I think Hollywood's completely broken.
It's very broken, which is why I'm glad that, the filmmaking locations are diversifying a little bit. People are going to Georgia and other states where the tax burden isn't so high to try to come up with new stories and things. And I do think the independent film industry is pretty vibrant, and there's a lot going on there. But yeah, the big Hollywood blockbusters just are not what they were. We always had, it was interesting what you were saying about actors, because I'm the same way. I don't really care about actors that much. There's a few that I will deliberately go out of my way to see because I think they're good actors. But for the most part, I don't care. And we always joke in my family, like when I ask my sister and my mother, like, what's that movie about? They always say, they give me a list of the actors that are in the movie. And I'm like, I don't care who's in the movie. Tell me what the movie's about. That's what I want to know. And that was a big difference between me and the female members of my family, is they would talk about the people in the movie, and I want to know what the story of the movie is or what the values of the movie are.
Yeah, maybe that's the difference between genders. I never thought about that. But yeah, I'm always
careful.
Nope. There's difference between genders, Logan.
Oh man, we're gonna get in trouble now.
It's ingrained, and there's only. Oh, now I'm gonna really go. If there's only two genders, I know maybe not all our libertarian friends believe in that, but I do. But and individual people are different too. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's gonna be wild.
We started talking a little bit about the collectivism on the left, and I think I've been thinking a lot about collectivism lately. And we always struggle with what to call ourselves because, libertarian, Hayek said libertarian is sort of a made up garbage word that's just kind of cobbled together and doesn't have any history. And we had to do it because the left took liberal from us. We used to be liberals. Now we're libertarians. It's not a great word. It's a little clunky. I always kind of like to think of myself as a radical individualist. And that's kind of how I describe myself to people when I don't want to get in trouble. Because sometimes if you say, if you say you're a conservative, you're in bad trouble with people. If you say you're a libertarian, they may not know what it is, but if they know what it is, you're in trouble because they think that you're just greedy and you hate the poor. So I've taken to calling myself an individualist because I think the big evil that besets our society is collectivism and this idea that we should identify people based on the groups that they belong to rather than as their virtues as an individual. I think that's the most important difference between the right and the left.
Yeah, with the label thing, I want to be a liberal really bad. I just don't want to be called. But if I tell my conservative friends that, they assume I'm a leftist. If I tell my leftist friends, I don't know what they think anymore. Well,
I like to I like to play the game of like what label can I use around different groups of people, and I have some super far left like socialist friends, and I can get away with calling myself an anarchist around them because they think anarchy is on the left. They think of like anarcho-communism.
Yep.
So I can say, oh, I'm an anarchist, and they're like, yeah, right on, smash the state, great, even though they really want more government. So
it's very interesting state smashing.
Yeah, you can get away with different stuff with different groups of people.
Yeah, anarchy doesn't work with the right and the law and order.
No,
because I hate it. I think like the Jeffrey Tucker, he considers himself, Rothbardians or more anarchy, but it doesn't mean ski mask and breaking store windows.
No, this is an argument I always have with Kibbe about this because, the popular conception of anarchy is chaos and violence, which is not what it means. It's from a Greek word meaning not ruled, without rulers is basically what it means, which I like. But it's the same thing with liberal. Like it's been taken over by these people who have a certain meaning for it. And I want to take the word back because I like anarchy. It etymologically makes sense to me. It is simple. It's powerful. It's just a good word. And I want to take it back and say, no, anarchy means peaceful cooperation and, not being controlled by a centralized power, which I think is good. But, like liberal, it's been co-opted by people who have a radically different idea. So if we're going to take liberal back, I want to take anarchy back too.
If we can get a package deal, I'll get it done. If that helps me get liberal back, because I really want to just be a liberal with Hayek.
I'm with you on that. I think we should definitely reappropriate that word.
I think Matt hit on that too with his most recent podcast, the Hannah Cox one, where he talked about, I think he mentioned he calls himself a libertarian because it's the only word almost available at this point.
Yeah.
Without getting put into a box too quickly.
Well, I'm trying to consciously call people on the left progressives rather than liberals. I always used to call them liberals, and so I'm trying not to use that word to describe them anymore so that we can have more of a shot at making
doing
it
the
mean
exact same thing.
Yeah, they're progressives. They're not liberals. And that ties them in with the early 20th century Woodrow Wilson, FDR kind of mindset, which is really what they are.
And once we take back liberal and we officially give them progressive 100%, we should change progressive to regressive.
Regressive or aggressive, either one is fine.
Either or, because you did write a great article years ago on fee, if anyone looks it up.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that article.
I think it's called it's one of my favorites you ever did. It might be called like the regressive left, but it fits in very nicely with Hayek's.
Yeah, and the thrust
I'm not
of
a
that,
conservative.
The thrust of that article is that there's this primitivism on the left where they kind of idealize previous states of history and nature, where they think of like the noble savage myth, where people who were, uncivil before civilization came, people were living in harmony with nature and everything was wonderful and there was no death and no suffering and no one had to work hard, and it's just not true. And things have gotten progressively better with technology and with the growth of civilization and cities and people further trading with each other and capitalism, to be frank. But there's this idea that there's this blissful, we can return to this bucolic existence and it will be better. And it's ahistorical. And it's a similar thing to what I think the conservatives have with their idealization of like the 1950s, saying like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had the family values and nuclear family of the 1950s? And when you actually do research, the 1950s were not so great. We're better off now than we were back then. So I think both parties have a little bit of that in them. But yeah, the progressives in particular tend to have this fetishization of primitive things or things that were long ago that I just think is showing an ignorance of history and a lack of perspective.
You're giving me ideas for... I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm like, God, I have to get a notepad and write down articles I want to write. As you're hitting me on the 1950s fetishization by the right. I mean, even I do it. I think about the Andy Griffith persona that show portrays. I actually was just watching it last night with my wife. It's our We Don't Know What to Watch, just put on an episode of Andy Griffith, but I think it's the values people want. But yeah, I think to your point, there's the one book like we've written by, was it Jonah? He's the Swedish guy, economist.
Johan Norberg?
Yeah, Johan Norberg. Kind of like just showing how we'd never been better off than right in this moment.
Yeah, and we talked about Steven Pinker before, and he's got the same thesis in his last two books, Enlightenment Now and The Better Angels of Our Nature, about how better things are. And I really do think it's the most dangerous idea that people have now, is that things are getting worse. Because when you have the idea that things are getting worse, there's no hope for the future. You're like, well, why not just destroy everything? Why work for anything? Why struggle? Let's just fight and burn things and loot and try to grab what we can from the remains before it all goes away. And I think that's what's causing so much of the violence and so much of the hatred we're seeing, is this idea that things used to be better and they're not going to get better. They're going to get worse and worse. And it fundamentally comes from an ignorance of history and not really knowing how things have improved over the years.
Yeah, to not overuse. It's a word the left overuses all the time, and it's lost a lot of its meaning. But to me, it sounds very fascist. I think of Nazi Germany as like, here are these ideas we hold as a society, and we are going to use authority to lock them into place, and we can never budge from these, and we will literally remove the unclean members from society, the people that don't fit, and even if you were here once and you step out of line, we'll just get rid of you. And I feel, again, that's an extreme. I don't think we're getting there, but I think people are drawn to that in a way, or we personify this 1950s or this certain time.
It's actually a great parallel, because that was the whole impetus behind World War II, was the Germany saying, well, we kind of got wrecked by World War I. Germany's been humiliated. Our economy's been destroyed. We got to return. We got to make Germany great again. We got to return to our roots. And, people are drawing the parallel with MAGA a lot, because Make America Great Again is very similar to what Germany wanted to do. I don't think it's really fair to call Trump a Nazi, but,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a ridiculous line to draw, but
yeah, the big impetus behind the Nazi Party was the idea that Germany had been humiliated and we were going to restore the country to its former greatness. And that's, the same thing the progressives want to do, and it's the same thing some hardline right people want to do, the nationalists on the right want to do. And I just think it's a bad idea. The liberals, the libertarians realize that the future is where things are going to be better, and we need to work together to make it a better future, and we don't need to give up on it. And that's the way we can improve society for everybody and eliminate poverty and eliminate disease and all these things that we care about.
Imagine liberty requires, I think about this, liberty requires humility and confidence.
Yeah.